in a desperate land. It was touch or go there for a minute, folks. It was nearly the end of the world, but rest assured, our hero David Cameron has come back from holiday to save us. We're all going to be fine. You know, they met in the Cobra room to see what the next course of action would be, and they're all going to save us. Don't you worry about a thing. I can't help but laugh at the absurdity of this silver spoon-fed Cameron who went to Eton, has come back from his lavish holiday to deal with the riffraff. Can you imagine all these toffs sitting around the Cobra room? Oh dear, ridiculous. Some of these idiots are so out of touch. I mean, like on the BBC, I don't know how many people watched it, but it was like, oh, this is the BBC. We urge all parents to tell their children to come home now. Send them text messages. Yeah, on their new mobile phones that they stole. If you think having some snooty cow on BBC patronise everyone is going to help the situation, think again. Of course, I'm talking about the riots here in the UK, in case you've been living under a rock. They're throughout London, now into Birmingham, Bristol, Liverpool and Manchester. And according to people on the ground who are posting things on Facebook and whatnot, lots of other locations as well. We've seen lots of looting, lots of fires. Innocent people are being hurt now in house fires and muggings. At least one person has been shot, and all the London police cells are now full. So it doesn't look like a great situation, I have to say. According to the BBC, I'm not sure whether it's happened yet or will have occurred by the end of the night, but 17,000 police were to be deployed today. There's talk about using water cannons. You know, I've got an idea. Why don't we use weed cannons? Just put a giant hose pipe at each end of the city and just pump in pot smoke. That'll make everybody chill the fuck out. Maybe we should do that. But of course, in reality, there have been talks of readying the troops and trying to enforce curfews and things like that. We can use the word martial law on the horizon. So I'll be getting into all of this tonight. You are, of course, tuned into the Wide Shut webcast on Resistance Radio. That's resistradio.com. I'm Keelan Balderson, and you can check out my website at wideshut.co.uk. So, London and other cities are burning, and, you know, as shocking as it is, I can't say I'm overly surprised. No one likes to see these pictures. They're horrific, and it's scary, but it's not surprising. It doesn't take a genius to see that we might have been heading this way. Several of the hosts here have predicted this sort of thing. And no, these riots aren't politically driven. They don't seem to have an ideology behind them. It's generally just mindless looting, in some cases organised looting. But to say this isn't connected to the austerity and the general downturn in society, I think is ignorant of the bigger picture. If we were all living prosperous and successful lives with a booming economy, jobs for everyone, we wouldn't be having this mess. You know, in many ways it is a class war, a directionless one. There's no leader telling the peasants to get their pitchforks out and take back their land from the upper classes. But what I do see is the lower class youth lashing out, like they've done for many years. But now they've got the excuse to do it at a certain level that's quite shocking to most people. You know, they're not consciously going after the rich. But when you're a poor teenager living in the concrete jungle, not much hope for the future, when an opportunity like this arises, of course you're going to go robbing. Of course you're going to go nick stuff with your mates. That's just that's just the way it happens. What this should be is a mirror that's held up to the Eton boys like David Cameron. You know, they all go to Eton, they're all part of that, what is it, the Bullingham Club or something like that. You know, these toffs. This needs to be the mirror that's shined up to them to say, look, your lavish lifestyles, the banking system that you support, the subsequent austerity cuts that you've forced onto people is, in some degree, part of the problem with this trouble. And you don't solve it, as some Tory MPs have suggested. MP Roger Helmer tweeted, "Time to get tough, bring in the army, shoot looters and arsonists on sight." That's an MP in our government wanting to shoot looters and arsonists on sight. Yeah, because somebody's life is worth a flat screen TV, you fucking moron. Who the hell voted for you? Let's spin it around. What about the looters in the financial industry that have stolen far more than these kids could ever steal? Should we round the bankers up and shoot the bankers? And I'm not suggesting that, but it's the hypocrisy of it all. And this lack of understanding. It really does show a divide in this country. You know, the comments on the news articles. Oh, shoot them all. Oh, dirty scallies, get a job. You know, one woman that I saw on the BBC, she owned a fashion shop, and they were interviewing her because her shop got smashed up, and she called them feral rats. Feral rats. Yeah, and pushing your sweatshop made materialist bullshit is much better, is it? There's a real divide and conquer going on right now. And it's that hateful, ignorant mentality that needs to stop. You know, the worst one I read was, oh, ship them out to Afghanistan if they want to fight. That's where the real men and heroes are. Is it? Really? The same corporate and financial entities that manipulated and benefit from the wars overseas are the same corporate and financial entities that have created the environment for this trouble to kick off. If you want to know why the police can't contain the riots, maybe it's because police funding has been cut. Police were the first to be cut, long before the financial collapse. It's been a running theme in this country. There aren't enough bobbies on the beat. You know, there's too much red tape, too much paperwork. They cut all the police and bring in these PCSOs that know nothing and have no power. You're worrying about looters. Well, that looting has only been enabled because of the looting by the bankers, taking money from the police. But that's just too much to think about. Send in the army, yeah. And of course the BNP have been jumping all over this, and the EDL have been jumping all over this. You want to go follow Nick Griffin's Twitter, you know, blaming black people, stringently defending the police. The EDL are now supposedly clashing with some of the rioters. It's just more factions for the elite to play off against each other. And you do see this hardline reactionary sort of mentality when society falls apart. The death penalty is back in the news cycle. Did anyone see that? Which, you know, is just barbaric and backwards. But people have this idea that when society is crumbling, we need to be hardline and kick everybody into gear. Bring back the death penalty. Get the scruffs by the neck. And, you know, it's a ridiculous way to look at things. What is the death penalty? Instead of trying to fix the root causes in society that lead people to be poorly educated or desperate enough to commit crimes that people consider, you know, that warrant a death penalty, you know, let's just kill them. It doesn't matter if they were abused as a child or had a chemical imbalance in their brain or were brainwashed into going to war and ended up tapped in the head or were so depressed and full of self-hatred that they just lashed out at the world. Instead of the million factors that go into these kind of things, oh, we'll just kill them. Yeah, that'll solve it. And there has been this media hype surrounding the idea of bringing back the death penalty in the UK. The government have launched this revamped e-petition system online where anybody can sort of create a petition on a subject, and if that petition is signed by 100,000 people or more, it will be addressed by Parliament, and a wider debate will be had with mind to sort of doing whatever the petition says. And one of these petitions that is being pushed by the BNP and is supposedly gaining ground is one about reintroducing the death penalty. It's ridiculous. And obviously it's not going to happen. It will be something that will be forgotten in a couple of months and we'll move on. I mean, do you honestly think there's doctors or authorities out there that all of a sudden will jump up and say, yeah, I'll give people the lethal injection? I have more faith in society than that. It is all hype. And usually what accompanies media hype is an agenda, some kind of divide and rule tactic. And as I say, one of the main backers of this petition is Nick Griffin. So what do you get? You get this left wing versus the evil Nazis that want to kill people. Great for headlines, great for selling papers, but overall it is just a distraction. But it is this hardline mentality that rears its ugly head when society is going down the shitter. As society crumbles, one side is going to come at you with a hardline nationalist approach. It's all the foreigners' faults, it's all the black people's fault, get the foreigners out, the black scroungers on welfare, we got to knuckle down, no messing about anymore, we got to put the drug dealers and the murderers to death. Fuck the prisoners, they have to eat bread and water. Labour camps. That's another petition on this website that's gaining ground. Feed prisoners bread and water. It's ridiculousness. But some sectors of society do fall for that shit. Petitions gaining more than 100,000 signatures could lead to a full debate in the House of Commons. Could. So, there are no guarantees anyway. It's really just a bread and circuses. Oh, this is for democracy. People can put petitions up, but really they only choose what they want to choose if it supports the agenda. So even the e-petition system itself is an illusion and a load of bollocks. But we are seeing this hardline mentality, and these people, they're just failing to look at the bigger picture. It just creates more division. And I mean, the media, the kings of divide and conquer, they're already blaming the anarchists. That's been one of the mantras on BBC last night and what I was watching this morning. And to be fair, it's not just the media, but because the media have already perpetuated the meme that mindless violence is what anarchism is, now the eyewitnesses that they're talking to are calling the rioters anarchists. They've completely butchered the word. And I mean, I don't know a lot about anarchy, but what I do know is these rioters aren't anarchists. This isn't the same black bloc that were, working during the Cuts protests. And anarchy really is a peaceful ideology. It's an ideology where people believe that state control and intrusion is wrong, and people can organize and take responsibility for themselves. Nobody causing this violence has a political goal or ideology. It may be the consequence of political and social problems, but I think very, very few are actually anarchists. But the media love their buzzwords. So now they're all anarchists. And the average person thinks that when you smash something, you're an anarchist because it causes anarchy. That's not the point. But and just other things they're blaming. If you've watched the news today, they're blaming social networking now. It's got nothing to do with societal problems. It's all Facebook's fault. One MP, it just came out a few minutes before I came on air, wants to close down the BlackBerry Messenger service. As if social networking is to blame. It's sort of the same line of thinking when people say, oh, this person murdered someone. It must have been because he had a horror film in his collection. Yeah, blame the horror film. Don't blame the internet for deep-rooted and complex social problems. Oh, them kids and their Facebook. So instead of dealing with the problem, let's just censor the internet. Great idea. Let's put cameras in everyone's homes. If you've got nothing to hide. And that's how fascist states develop. Instead of admitting and conceding that the state and the system is to blame, their answer is to always increase the power and tyranny of the state and system to quell that sort of rebellion against it. Bankers steal trillions and put us into debt slavery. Police forces are cut, so poor kids go on a wild rampage and take advantage of it. So let's shoot all the poor kids and ban their Facebook pages. Instead of stopping the bankers stealing trillions, and instead of trying to end this debt slavery. There's a bigger picture to look at here. And also, I don't think we should lose sight of the initial spark that caused these riots in Tottenham. As much as the media don't want to get into it, they want to play pacifist, they want to wait for the inquiry. But let's not forget, a young man, this Mark Duggan chap, was shot dead by police. And in those pockets of London where there is police brutality and tension, and where it's perceived that police are just out to get you, and they stop and search random people, and they push you against the wall, and they stop your car just because you're black and you might be a drug dealer. When it appears that an innocent man has been shot, that tension is going to boil over. People have had enough. And when that spark hits, everything else follows. The looters see the opportunity, and the police are stretched, so others feel safe copying the rioting as it spreads across the country. Cookie brought it up in the Pal Talk chat last night. It's kind of like the second LA riots in the 90s after Rodney King got beat down. The poor, oppressed people in that region had enough. There's no justice for them. If they're treated like shit, why should they care about anyone else? Why should they give a shit about your department stores or whatever? It's dog eat dog. They don't have any values because none have been given to them. They don't care. And it does appear that this initial shooting may be a cover-up. We've seen shifting stories, shifting explanations at why the police shot this man. If it's not clear and they can't get their story straight, then to me it means there's something dodgy going on. And the Guardian, who have actually been doing some pretty good coverage of this whole thing, they're reporting that the bullet alleged to have come from Mark Duggan was actually a police bullet. There was apparently a bullet conveniently lodged in a policeman's radio so he didn't die. Somehow hit his radio. And they claimed it came from Duggan, and that's why this guy was shot. But it turned out it was a police bullet. So was it all a setup? Did they kill him by accident and fire a shot into their own man's radio to create a story they could get away with or try and get away with? Was there a melee of bullets and one of them just happened to hit the policeman? Just these crazy policemen with their guns. Was it just a big accident? If there was evidence that this guy had a gun, where is it? And in fact, just as I was coming on air, the BBC published an article, "No evidence that Tottenham man opened fire." So, I mean, that really says it all, folks. And this is what sparked that initial congregation. It wasn't violent, but they wanted answers about this lack of transparency from the police. You know, in their eyes, another injustice. And they went to the police station. They had a peaceful, you know, people standing outside the police station, and they were snubbed. Nobody came out to speak to them. Nobody talked to them. And effectively, they were treated like criminals right away, and they brought the riot squads out. So what do you expect to happen? And I know some people will say, well, the Daily Mail reported that this Duggan chap was a drug dealer. Well, what do you expect? It's in the ghetto. These things happen. Does it mean he should be shot dead when he doesn't have a gun? Does it mean his friends and family should be blanked by the police when they have questions about his death? And just remember, folks, who ships a lot of the drugs in? If you do a little digging, and you'll start to see names like the CIA and MI6, you know, there's so much hypocrisy and grey areas with this. Questions follow the night of Tottenham violence. This is from the Morning Star. There are still more questions than answers today as Tottenham locals try to pin down the cause of Saturday night's riots. Politicians and media appeared to agree that the night had begun with peaceful protests outside Tottenham police station to protest an apparent blackout on information around the fatal police shooting of local man Mark Duggan. But police figures remained unable to explain how tense scenes between police and protesters disintegrated overnight into a war zone. One eyewitness told BBC Radio that the crowd was in uproar after an unarmed teenage girl was beaten back by the officers. The police line had actually charged toward her and started hitting her with batons. Subsequently, it turned out she was only 16, and this made everyone absolutely go up in uproar, he said. So again, it appears that that initial spark was down to police injustice and police brutality. And then it starts spreading, and all the other social factors come into play, and we get this perfect storm for mayhem. But they're just thugs that want to break stuff. It's not as simple as that. And that mentality only serves to create an us versus them scenario. There was a good column by somebody called Nina Power in The Guardian that I think Cookie posted in the Powtalk chat last night. I haven't got the link, but I'll read some of it. One journalist wrote that he was surprised how many people in Tottenham knew and were critical of the Independent Police Complaints Commission. But there should be nothing surprising about this. When you look at the figures for deaths in police custody, at least 333 since 1998, and not a single conviction of any police officer for any of them, then the IPCC and the courts are seen by many, quite reasonably, to be protecting the police rather than the people. Combine understandable suspicion and resentment towards the police based on experience and memory, with high poverty and large unemployment, and the reasons why people are taking to the streets become clear. The borough that includes Tottenham has the fourth highest level of child poverty in London, an unemployment rate of 8.8%, double the national average, with one vacancy for every 54 seeking work in the borough. Those condemning the events in the past couple of nights in North London and elsewhere would do well to take a step back and consider the bigger picture. A country in which the richest 10% are now 100 times better off than the poorest, where consumerism predicated on personal debt has been pushed for years as the solution to a faltering economy, and where, according to the OECD, social mobility is worse than any other developed country. You know, There's a wider picture to this, folks. Good quote in the chat. When the people have nothing, they have nothing to lose, and that's exactly right. What do they care? They're smashing shit up. They've got nothing else to live for, really. Now, something we should perhaps address is the outcome of all of this. And you know, the authorities knew that something like this was coming. It doesn't take rocket science. Take Nick Clegg from April 2010. In response to what would happen if Tories took control, Nick Clegg replied to the news reporter said, is rioting in the streets likely? And he said it's a very serious risk if Tories take control. Nick Clegg predicted it. Should we call him, you know, Mystic Clegg? But the ironic thing is he joined the Tories, and there are these riots that he predicted. And now that they're here, the establishment are going to be using it in any way possible to protect and further their agenda. And this is the problem. Those rioters and most members of the public commenting on it, they don't see that bigger picture. If martial law hit the streets of Britain, if we get curfews, if we get new laws in place to deal with this threat, then this fascist incrementalism that we've seen since the normal protests, it's just going to increase exponentially. Do you think they're going to stop once it's started? You know, if they set the precedents now, the precedents of troops on the streets and water cannons or whatever, they're just going to be used more often in the future. It's going to become the norm. Give them an inch and these fuckers take a mile. And one thing we have to remember is we're not recovering from this economic crisis. Look at the latest debt ceiling fiasco in America. All the increasing stress on the EU as bankers keep forcing member states to take bailouts. Headline news in the Telegraph today: UN wants new global currency to replace dollar. This is mainstream news. The dollar should be replaced with a global currency, the United Nations has said, proposing the biggest overhaul of the world's monetary system since the Second World War. Hang on a minute. I thought that was all a conspiracy theory. Oh, the UN's not trying to make a world government. They're not trying to make a world currency. Well, there it is, plain to see. Things don't look good, folks, and it's probably going to get worse. And my worry is that there may actually become a time when, in order to survive, some of us might actually have to loot corporations and supermarkets. You know, especially in the cities where growing food is a lot harder, and some people probably won't even consider the possibility of growing food. If they clamp down now with these mindless riots, it acts as a trial run for them. It's a preemptive strike to prevent any kind of opposition when shit does hit the fan. And just like with the so-called anarchists at the cut protests, what we have is a meme, there's that word again, a meme being created that any kind of opposition to the system is bad. It's all the evil anarchists. It's all mindless thugs, which may be true in some respects, but it sets that precedent for the future when some of us may actually need to steal a loaf of bread to eat. When the true fascist colours emerge, by the time that comes, it may already be the norm to have curfews and troops on the streets and water and sound cannons and laws, new laws and things. So as Blue Bus said yesterday, we may be seeing this problem, reaction, solution scenario, where the riots are used to bring in the martial law or some kind of clampdown. It doesn't necessarily have to be troops. You know, they're trying to get wars elsewhere. They might not be available. But either way, it's going to mean less freedom for the average person. Those who give up liberty for security deserve neither and get neither, because the state then becomes the aggressor. And I know some people like to run with the idea of it all being completely planned, and there's provocateurs at every stage, and all the fires were set by provocateurs working for the Illuminati. And if that info does come out, then I'm not saying we shouldn't pursue it. There may be provocateurs in there, you don't know. But organised gangs do exist. People do loot. You know, it's just the degradation of society, still caused by the elite, but you don't necessarily have to jump to the conspiracy theories just yet. And I mean, yeah, there are some suspicious things, like the police standing back and letting it happen, like not enough police being deployed. It is a little suspicious, but at this stage, I think it's a huge jump to say that, you know, it's all provocateurs or whatever. Especially when you get these conspiracy guys, I won't name any names, that come out and say, oh, my sources, information I've gathered, says that this may all be a setup. Well, if that's so, please show me the information first. It doesn't need to be a setup. It already is a setup. You're just not looking at the deeper social problems. And we were talking about it in the chat the other night. There are organised criminal gangs out there. And when they see an opportunity, they're going to exploit it. Whether that means looting, whether that means settling feuds. You know, there are gangs in London, and if they see that the police are too busy, it may be a good time to pop one of your rival gangs. You know, to settle some feuds. So I don't see any real evidence for it to be all provocateur or whatever. There were no rioters wearing the same boots as the police like we saw at one of the G20s in Canada. None of that sort of stuff. But it doesn't make it any less sinister or tragic. And let's not forget, one of the core beliefs of these people is never let a good crisis go to waste. And the idea of clamping down came way before these riots. You know, the people in charge wanted to stop the normal protests. They were calling for banning the protests months ago, weren't they? I'm sure some of you remember that. December 2010, Telegraph. Police may ban anti-government marches through central London. So this was long before these riots. It was already on the cards. This is just the perfect time to push it through. July 24th this year, The Guardian. Police role plan for army officers. Army officers could be parachuted into the highest police ranks as part of a major government shake-up. Downing Street is looking at changes that would establish an officer class in local forces. Plans for the army to be running shit before the riots. It's the problem, reaction, solution. But it doesn't mean that they deliberately started the riots. They set the environment that it was in a general sense. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. But even the martial law thing, that was already being built up. An article I did in February, quiet martial law coming to the UK. The case for mixing SAS troops with the police and other counter-terrorism forces has been strengthened after a car carrying Prince Charles and Camilla was ambushed by protesters last year. They were talking about it then. So an agenda for martial law has definitely been waiting in the wings for the perfect crisis, and unfortunately this may be it. It might not be, but it also may be. And as I say, it doesn't have to be troops. Something else I've been covering is the push for private security, and you see how they're privatizing everything. The police forces are the next ones to go. And I'm not just talking about the usual private security you see in shopping areas, but actual private security on the streets with police powers. You know, if the police are stretched thanks to the bankers looting everything, then it's the perfect opportunity to roll out these unaccountable private forces. You know, oh, there's not enough police. We need extra people. Oh, look, these private companies will help. Yay! Not really, because they're thugs that haven't been trained properly. Privately run security to do police work in Britain. And I think I've covered this before on this show, actually. As a further sign of the degradation facing UK society, a force of privately run security guards have hit the streets of Britain to pick up the slack left behind by policing cuts. The community safety scheme that was originally set up in 2002 has laid relatively dormant over the past few years. However, as the Met face a 20% cut in the police budget, over 400 security personnel in London alone have been granted controversial power over regular citizens. Whereas traditional private security have no legal authority to enforce the law over any British citizen, the government have quietly granted security companies working for councils, hospitals and private establishments some of the same powers as fully qualified police. These include the power to issue fines, confiscate alcohol or tobacco, direct traffic, stop vehicles, and even demand somebody's name and address, which for the police themselves is a grey area. And of course now maybe they'll be brought in to help stop the rioters and the protests. During an interview on the Politics show, John Tully of the Met Police Federation raised some pertinent points about the privately funded scheme. For us, we need to know the benefits of it. Where is their training coming from? What regulation are they going to have? A private security firm is a business owned by private individuals seeking to make a profit by lending its services primarily to other corporate businesses, such as shopping centres, sporting events and bars. Their job is to make money. Your Bobby on the beach job, in theory, is to protect the people and keep the peace under the rule of law. Technically, anybody can declare themselves a private security company, just like anybody can open a local shop. There are huge implications for accountability. Although many will agree that policing in Britain is going downhill as social unrest increases, rookies still have to undertake 30 weeks of intensive training and 2 years on-the-job work experience. The new scheme will only implement a maximum of 1 week's training. Not a very encouraging prospect. So people may sit there and say, oh, bring in the army or bring in these private security firms. But who's to say they're going to leave afterwards, you know? And who's to say they're actually going to do a good job? Do you really want some untrained thugs running around? Or do you really want shell-shocked, trigger-happy troops coming back and putting cities on lockdown and shooting poor kids? It's ridiculous. And are we ever going to address the root causes of these problems, or are we just going to blame Facebook, or just call them thugs with no context? But let's not get negative about it. It's a great chance for a learning experience. Big things are happening in the world, and as scary and as worrying as it all seems, and don't take this the wrong way, because I obviously don't wish suffering on anybody, whether through riots or national debt or war or whatever. But I've got to admit, part of me is quite excited to be alive right now. to be living through these changes in society. You know, I often look back at other eras and think, wow, that must have been a great time to be alive. That generation was really fighting for something. Or you know, that era's music was so much better than now. They had so much passion. The civil rights movement, the 60s, you know, all these things. But there's no need to look in the past anymore, because right now is a pivotal part of history. And in some twisted way, I do feel quite lucky to be alive right now, to be in the fight, to try and spread this awareness. And I'm glad to be associated with everyone here at Resistance Radio and the wider alternative movement who do get it and are trying to help spread awareness. And no school or state indoctrination centre could ever get us to this point. It's about self-learning, independent media, other individuals passing along honest information. That's what's waking people up and tearing down the old paradigms. And obviously, don't expect results overnight, but it is happening. And I know here at Resistance Radio, you know, we often get down and we get burned out and quite pessimistic about what the future holds with all this austerity, the collapse of the financial system. We are seeing the increasing Big Brother state, pre-crime arrests, all this kind of thing. More wars of aggression, ill-informed protesters and rioters. You know, don't you just wish you could tell all these people that, yeah, you should be angry, but this is why, and this is why you shouldn't smash things up. It can burn you out. It can get you pessimistic. And I'm not stupid. I know people are dying because of wars. But there is a positive spin on this. We're going to be fine. I look at it like this. No matter how bad it gets, humanity's natural instinct is to preserve the species. We're going to be fine. We're going to come out of this system stronger. And that's not all love and light and new age mumbo jumbo. You know, as I say, I'm not stupid. I know people are dying. I know people are suffering because of the breakdown of society, because of the system. But that injustice is the catalyst for our evolution. And we're at the forefront of that because we recognize the absurdity of the system. We're sharing ideas. We're making connections. We're helping others see through the propaganda. And it's bad. The riots are scary. And it's going to get worse. But there's a reason that it's got this way. The universe is trying to tell you something. It's screaming, you know, hey, idiot, the world is fucked. What are you going to do about it? And through that process, we will find a solution. We will figure it out. We will do something about it. And when we do, we can look back at this time as a learning experience. We're still children on this planet. Imagine the success and the wonders and the advancements that we'll have when we actually grow up and realize that we don't need this fiat currency printed out of thin air by private bankers. That we don't need to kill people and control each other. That violence never brings about revolutionary change. You know, we're still children. We're barely out of the womb in terms of humanity's evolution. But like children, we will learn. And we will learn the hard way. But the hard way is always the best way because it's done through experience. You know, the school of life, the school of hard knocks. That's how we progress, by experiencing the hard times. You know, a textbook can tell you how high Mount Everest is, but until you're halfway up that bastard with an ice pick in your hand, you know, face red raw, running only on pure emotion and spirit, you haven't truly experienced how high that motherfucker is. Likewise, people can read blogs and watch YouTube videos about how fucked up the world is, how people are still starving in certain parts of the world, how governments are lying, how wars are killing people. But some people are going to have to experience this stuff themselves on a more personal level. Then it will be real for them. Then, right now they can still switch on X Factor or some, shitty soap opera and ignore everything. Until those people experience tyranny, then they're not going to learn and they're not going to grow. But that's why I'm not fearful of it. And that's why this time in history is special, because we are slowly experiencing it. Tyranny is ramping up, and some of us are out there pointing out this stuff to others. And just like the toddler who burns their hand on a hot cooker and flinches back in pain, when shit hits the fan and humanity suddenly flinches back in pain, like the toddler who will now know never to touch that cooker again because it fucking hurt, humanity will know never ever to develop a system like this again. That's your consciousness shift. That's the awakening, the 2012, the age of Aquarius. Beings aren't coming down from space to zap us all into a new dimension because we sat in a big circle and hummed about the goddess. Change happens because people experience it. People are losing their wealth to the corrupt financial system, and they don't want it to happen again. Change happens because, a thug in a stormtrooper outfit boots you in the face, and you don't want it to happen again. Change happens because it has to happen. There's no other option. Humanity is backed into a corner, and we're just going to have to adapt and progress, because that's what humanity does. And most of us probably won't be there to see it, but we're here to get the ball rolling. And that's why it's great to be alive right now, because it's an immense learning experience. Hope that makes sense to people. Maybe it's a bit airy-fairy, I don't know, but that's the way I see it. We learn from experience, and the bad is not always bad because it helps you to progress to the good. And there's not going to be any prime ministers in the future. There's not going to be any presidents in the future. None of this phony bullshit. Humanity's going to look back and laugh at the idea of having a president. I was watching the news the other day. I can't quite remember exactly what it was, but they say all these phrases, don't they? Oh, we hope Obama makes the right decision. Obama has decided on whatever. The country looks to Obama. All these different statements you hear. But how utterly ridiculous and archaic is the concept of a president? And how ridiculous are people's perceptions of a president or prime minister? As if they're the ones making the decisions. As if Cameron and Obama are really the ones running the Anglo-American establishment, yeah. And we know it's ridiculous. Obama is a Wall Street CFR puppet. Cameron was happy to take £50,000 backhanders from the corporations. But even if you don't see even if you don't see through the system, you don't see the massive financial Ponzi scheme, you don't see the New World Order agenda, and you believe 100% in the system, it's still completely ridiculous to talk about a president in the way that people do, or a prime minister. Obama has a whole White House staff, advisors, czars, there's lobbyists and interest groups and Congress. Nothing is his decision. And if it was, and he was the one calling the shots, then it would be a dictatorship. It's a childlike fairy tale system that doesn't make any logical sense. The presidents and prime ministers are just the front men for the agenda. And they're a scapegoat for when the agenda reveals itself. You don't like this war, then it was the president's fault. we'll just bring in another one. And they always act like the father figure, the big, strong leader, playing off people's, psychology. But it defies all logic. Why do we need this mythical leading figure? And that's all it is. It's just this mythical concept. In thousands of years, we're all going to look back, or whoever's there in thousands of years, and they're just going to laugh at the silly primitives that had their people that they called presidents, that they pretended ran shit. It's ridiculous. And violent protesting and rioting isn't going to help that transition. It's not going to help that realization. It plays into the elite's hands. It's all the false paradigm at work. While the elite sit comfortable in their ivory towers, everybody else is fighting amongst themselves. We have these cuts. Some people get restless. They start to get violent. But the majority of those people have not looked at the root problems within the financial system. So their actions become mindless. It's just, I don't want cuts. Rah. But they don't really know why they've got cuts. At the same time, you have, the anarchist movement, this quasi-anarchist movement that likes to smash stuff. And it's just ridiculous, because then other sectors of society point at them, and other people point at each other, and the working class point at the whiny uni kids, and then the upper classes moan at the lower classes that are rioting. It's just it becomes a big circle of finger pointing. And the elite just keep getting away with it. And, although these rioters right now might be having fun now, really they're just tools. They're just making their own lives a lot worse in the future. Because if they do bring in martial law, I don't think they're going to like that very much. At least if they had a unified goal, that might count for something. But there are things we can do. It needs to be non-violent. We need to bypass the government. We need to, make the government and the corporate elite redundant. If you don't like the school system, don't smash a school. Homeschool your child. It's as simple as that. If you don't like illegal wars for oil, don't buy oil. Bike to work. Have a carpool. Use public transport. Slowly make changes. If you don't like the poisonous shit on the supermarket shelves, don't get angry at them for putting it there. Grow your own food. Or if that's not your thing, support local farmers that do grow food. If you don't like the propaganda on the television, turn the television off. Stop paying the TV license. Embrace the alternative media. If you don't like the fiat currency that we're under, maybe start talking about trading things. Do swap-its. You can start making these changes. There are things we can do. It's all good getting angry at the system. And a lot of the time when these people are protesting and getting angry at the system, they're looking for the system, the same people in power, to change the system. Well, they're already criminals. It's up to us to change the system in a non-violent way. But that about wraps things up for me tonight. It's been a bit of a rant. It's gone pretty quick. I do need to say, though, my show slot is moving times. So next week, I'm going to be on Monday at 8 p.m. I now have the Monday time slot, not the Tuesday. It just makes it a bit easier for me. I can sort of plan the shows at the weekend and then have the whole week to sort of go on with my other projects instead of starting Monday and then thinking, oh, I've got to do my show on Tuesday. But yeah, so I'll now have a Monday show on Resistance Radio. And tonight we've got another show, the Zach Locke Show, in half an hour. So be sure to come back and check that out. He'll be interviewing two people who were part of the BBC 9/11 documentary with Charlie Veitch, which is definitely going to be interesting to hear. But other than that, catch you later, guys.
London burning!